This is Platemark. My name is Ann Shafer, and I am your host. This is Series 3 of Platemark, in which I'm interviewing fabulous people who occupy various roles in the print ecosystem, from curators to gallerists to artists to printers to auction house folks. Today's guest is an auction house guy, Adam McCoy. He works for Rago Auctions, and I'm so excited to talk to him because I've been wanting to talk to an auction person for a long time. You know, it's an interwoven part of the ecosystem, but he's the first auction guy I've been able to pepper questions with. And honestly, I still have questions even after an hour and a half talking to him. We talk about Andy Warhol. Adam wrote his master's thesis on Warhol's early screen prints. And we talk about what Warhol would make of his current status, the longevity of his work in the marketplace. And we also talk about artists that used to bring in $250,000 per print and now aren't bringing in nearly that much. You know, the vagaries of the market. We get into all sorts of stuff. All right, let's see, housekeeping. I identify as a cishet white woman and I use the pronouns she, her. I record Platemark in Baltimore, Maryland, the land of the Piscataway Conoy people. I'm going to say to you that I'm going to be including fewer and fewer images in the show notes because it's a lot of work. And I think you can probably find most things online if you're really curious about them. So if you object, let me know. There's a little microphone on platemarkpodcast.com. You can run over there and leave me a voicemail. Also, I'd love for you to think about how much you value the content of Platemark and head over to platemarkpodcast.com and hit the support and donate button. It's just me. All right, buckle up. Here we go. Adam, it is great to see you. Thanks for coming on Platemark today.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
We didn't know each other till very recently, and I wanted to talk to you because you're in a sector of the ecosphere that I haven't gotten to yet, which is the auction house.
Yes, auction houses are there. They are a thing.
They are a thing, but they've sort of shifted, I think, over time. It's weird.
It really has. I made the switch from museums and auctions about 2008 or so. When I first started, you could really look across the sales, and most of them were trade buyers, probably 60, 70%. And today, that's not true. Each artist market, of course, is different. There's going to be some artists that are heavily driven by private buyers, and then there will be artists where it's heavily trade. Warhol would be a good example of one, where you usually expect to see about 70% of that market bought by trade, but other areas, especially, say, American modernism, 19th century, most of that's driven by private collectors now.
Huh, weird. All right, well, before we get into the business of the business, because I do want to get into it, tell us about you. Where did you grow up, and how did you find yourself in the art biz in the first place?
I suppose I zigged when I should have zagged, but I've been very fortunate. I grew up in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which probably is not on most people's art world radars, I suppose. But there is some good art there, I will say, especially if you're into Western art. And I grew up going to the Gilcrease and museums like that. And so it's got a special spot in my heart. When I was in my undergrad at the University of Kansas, I had the wonderful opportunity to meet a gentleman named Charlie Eldridge, who had previously been the director of the Smithsonian's American Art Museum. And I kind of blame him in a lot of ways for getting me started on art. I thought I was sort of a mixture of humanities and business and so forth. I took an art history class, and that was it. I was sold. I ended up getting a double major with art history in there and spent some time at the Smithsonian afterwards. I thought I was going to spend my entire career as a curator until I hopped around a few different institutions until I got a call from Christies back in 2007 and said, well, how do you be interested in coming up here, working for us, joining the print department? Okay, well, let's have a conversation, see what this entails. And I gotta say, got there, got to meet some of the people in the company, the specialists, and I was sold. It was absolutely wonderful. My colleagues were fantastic. There's a sincere interest in the objects and how they're presented, as well as a business element as well. But it was just a wonderful experience. That was, joined in 2008 and was at Christie's until 2021 when I decided to depart for other adventures.
Was the job at Christie's print department, was that the first you had been in the print part of the art history world?
No, I actually wrote my master's on Warhol's early use of screen printing, and it's not something that's really widely taught in academia. It's a very focused study on printmaking and the history of and the artist's endeavors. And so I kind of went on a bit of a deep dive there. After I finished grad school, I was fortunate enough to have a position at the McNay in San Antonio, and it was with the prints and drawings department, and it was one of the best things I could have ever done. I spent an entire year just looking. An entire year and 15,000 works where I sat there and pulled each one out of the Solander boxes. I got to look at them in depth. And the only thing they asked of me was to come up with 2 exhibitions, occasionally lecture, and occasionally give a tour. For small little salary and benefits, that was fantastic. That was the best thing in the world as far as I was concerned.
It does point to something that I think I've said out loud, but if I haven't, I don't know why, that becoming confident about your eye and about the differences in techniques is you just have to keep looking and looking and looking and looking, which is hard for the lay person who's not in a print room 24/7. Yeah. So it's really, I don't know how to even make that available to people, but that's sort of what it takes.
Well, it's one of the fascinating things when you start reading through these early purposes behind having museums, to train the eye of the collector, and not just the collector, but I mean everything. Even when you read about why the Metropolitan was founded, there's the idea of training craftspeople and everybody and raising all of society up in some senses. But you're right. If you don't have regular access, it is, and not just to one object. With prints, of course, I mean, it's also seeing multiple examples of an impression or state or whatnot. With works on paper, then it's getting the full range of how an artist practice their craft. So,
right. Yeah. When you were at Kansas, did you take prints from Steve Goddard at the museum?
I knew Steve. I got to know Steve actually at Print Council, not so much at the University of Kansas. The time he was more on the curatorial side. He didn't teach the courses quite as often at that point. Spent a heck of a lot of time talking with Charlie, though, and several other people. I got to say the faculty at the University of Kansas were spectacular also.
Yeah, I think we've talked often, well, almost with every guest, I think, about who was that one teacher. And Charlie was it for you. For me, it was Arne Lewis at the College of Worcester. So there you go. The person who sort of, I don't know, it's always a story about their passion and about how they just kind of opened up the world of possibilities within that, very minute and not so mainstream study lane. But having you on is really all about, yes, in fact, there are jobs in the art sector, and one of them happens to be at an auction house.
There are a lot of jobs at auction houses, and whenever we would have interns come in, I always sit down and explain, specialist is only one track that somebody can take. There are a million different ways somebody can contribute in the art world that is meaningful and substantive. Doesn't just have to be going out, talking to clients, looking at art, valuing it, and doing the deal. I mean, business managers, all the behind-the-scenes work that goes into it, the people who handle all the authentication. I mean, that is a lot of work and fascinating because you get to know the estates, the scholars far better than most people ever get to, just because they're having to deal with the actual business of making sure what is going into a sale is authentic and does meet all the criteria. So.
When I was a youngster, I had a friend who worked at Christie's in the general sales department, which seemed like a hamster wheel if there ever was one, because they came up so fast. But so that's always been my impression of working in the auction house field, is that the pace is really fast. How long does a authenticator, cataloger, photographer person have to prepare a sale?
Yes, it is fast, and depending on the department, it is fast and furious. You got to keep in mind, what's going into a sale doesn't necessarily mean it just came in yesterday. It could have been sitting in the warehouse. I have seen works that have taken years to authenticate, I've seen works where it's you send an email 5 minutes later, you hear back saying, yep, it's fine. I've had instances where we've had to send works to Paris, Madrid, London, you name it. There have been instances where the scholars say, I'm on the next plane and I will see you tomorrow evening. It really does just depend. And you would think that the number of zeros on the estimate are tied to that. It really doesn't. Sometimes some of the lowest value works can be the most difficult to have authenticated for a variety of reasons and take the longest. And whereas, get into seven figures and you can have it done in no time. That's not always the case, but every artist and artist foundation scholar can be quite different, actually. So yes, the pace is quite fast and furious. The deadlines are there. The budgets that we have to hit are real. Fortunately, it's a pretty big world.
Wait. So you said budget. Now I'm intrigued. Do you mean the budget of what the sales bring in or the cost of making it all happen?
A little of both. The targets you're trying to hit for each quarter, because again, it's still a business. So you have targets where you want to meet. Now, doesn't mean that tomorrow the whole company is going under or anything like that if it isn't met. But it's run just like any other business where you've got targets to hit. So you got to pay salaries and rent and so forth.
Sure, but you don't know well, I suppose this is the difference. You're not sitting back and waiting for me to say, I have a few things I want to sell. You're actively recruiting, say, okay.
At all points in time. And there's so many facets that go into that. It's not just waiting for someone to say, hey, I've decided to sell this. I think the market's good for it. There's also lots of trust in estate work, insurance work. So conversations are constantly happening. Some projects, just come to quick fruition. Others, I had some where I spent the better part of a decade to reel the collection in.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But how do you find these collections and people? Like, are you watching the obits go by?
No. I do know people who do. It is a real thing. Fortunately, never had to quite deal with that. But people do start estate planning. Financial advisors talk about that. If somebody's built a collection that is of considerable value, it is an asset at that point. It's something that would fall under, say, private wealth. And so whoever their banker is or wealth manager, they're going to say, look, you need to think about long-term considerations. Just like an insurance company can say, look, you need to go out and have this appraised for coverage. Is there a particular dollar threshold where that happens? Not necessarily, but these objects do have value. Being a good steward, part of it is not just making sure the work, a watercolor is not sitting in front of a window exposed to full UV. They also, a Homer or Hopper or whatnot, watercolor also needs to be appraised, maintained, and if it's part of a large estate, it needs to be factored into it. So, yeah.
Okay, so have you found that there are gigantic encyclopedic print collections out there, the kind of which would come to the National Gallery or the BMA in 1946 of 20,000 things? Like, are those still out there?
Yeah, very much so.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Who are these people?
No, they come up. Sometimes you'll see a single owner sale. Sometimes, collections will get divided up. There's one that's coming up at Sotheby's right now. It's Leslie Garfield's collection. And I mean, that's a historic collection. And bravo to Sotheby's for taking it in. He had a very discerning eye, very supportive of prints, whether it be through the Print Council or museum exhibitions. I'm just using that as one example. Another one's the Josephowitz collection that's coming up at Christie's. I mean, geez, that is one where the appraisals were done for years and years and years for those old masters. So, yeah.
Well, so I'm trying to put myself in the seat of the listener, and one of them is saying to themselves, I've got I have a few things, come to think of it, that my husband's like, we need to deaccession a few things. What are the steps that a collector or a person who happens to own a few things or get them from their uncle or whatever, what do they have to do in order to be ready for contact with you?
Literally have an iPhone. That's about it. It doesn't even have to be an iPhone. You basically need to be able to take a picture and send an email, and that will be enough to start the conversation. It's that simple. Most auction houses, whether it's Rago Llama, Christies, Sotheby's, Phillips, you name it, there's a way to do a general submission. If it's not worth much, you might get an automated response saying, thank you, doesn't meet our minimum. And I guarantee you, if it is a wonderful, rare state of Munch's Madonna, you will be getting a call in next to no time at all.
Yeah, who's taking all that stuff? Like, is there somebody, a triage person that's reading
Usually.
the emails?
Yeah, usually there is. So,
There's a little judgment call there.
I have had it happen, though. I had a collection of Munch, Picasso, and Matisse built by a famous movie producer who stayed under the radar. Wonderful impressions. Built it over the course of about 20 years. And yeah, came in as a cold call saying, I've got a few XYZ. And it's one of those things, 9 times out of 10, I would have said, this is malarkey, whatever. But just enough of the right words were said to say, okay, this is worth picking up the phone. Let's have a conversation. And sure enough, it turned out to be right.
So you're also saying that I just need to take pictures and I don't need to like inventory my own collection and send you a list and where I bought them and how much I bought them for and all that stuff?
Those questions will come.
It's a multi-step process, people.
Yeah. There is no one shot and done. It's always, well, and you wouldn't want it to be that way either. It's a time of discovery for both sides. Everybody, learning, is there a fiduciary need? Is this just sort of, hey, I kind of want to know, what's the market like for this at the moment? Or is it, we've got to pay the tax bill and it's got to go situation.
Oh, okay. I never thought about that. I just was thinking about I need to buy my next print. Need to empty the walls so I can move on.
Well, and we get that. In fact, I had that call this morning. I filled the walls of both houses. That's salon style, and my spouse told me I can't do this until I get rid of something.
Yes, that's sort of what I mean. I don't have 2 houses, and I only have 1 salon hung wall. So I feel like I'm still okay. But then what happens? So you say, yes, these are of a value that we think we can manage, or what is your minimum?
Business managers love to talk about minimums because there is a certain amount of cost to bringing a work to market. Art handlers, authentication, photographers, color correction, the whole thing. It costs money. Just even if a work is $1,000, it's going to cost money to bring it to market. Business managers are very fixed on that sort of cost and how do we stay profitable. So I gotta say, I don't know too many specialists that are worried about that, actually.
I've asked the wrong guy on.
Yeah, when you love an object, you want to bring it forward, see what you can do with it, see who's interested. So it's going to be different for every artist. If we're talking Whistler plates that Whistler's market, with the exception of maybe the Venice set, it's a little touch and go at the moment. There are, some of the Amsterdam ones, absolutely, there's value there. But some of the others, that it's a little weak. I might say, unless it's just a great impression, no thank you. It's going to be a few hundred to under 1,000, even at 1,000, because I know the market's probably, there's a good chance of it passing. I'm going to have to eat the cost on it. Flip side, though, if it's somebody who's fairly emerging and it's one where we want to sort of cultivate that market, then we lower the bar. We're happy to take it, even if it doesn't necessarily even cover our costs by the time we charge the buyer's premium. Just because you don't want to give up that area, you want to be present, because eventually today's emerging artists are going to be tomorrow's blue chip artists. And if you don't have that knowledge, you don't know who's participating, and if that's where people are interested at the moment, and that's what they can afford is the Cato at $1,000. You're going to do it just to stay relevant effectively. So there isn't a good sort of, this is there is, in theory, our minimum value is X, but it's not necessarily enforced.
The vagaries of the market have always amazed me. Like, why?
Me too.
Why is Whistler on the shits, and why is Mary Cassatt getting $150,000 for a, whatever?
Her market's actually a bit rocky right now, even for the great color aquatints that I had an impression that was actually in the Duran Ruel show when she first started showing those. 15 years ago, I could have sold them for $150,000, $200,000 a pop, especially if it had both her signature and Roy's signature. Today, no, the value's pretty far down on them. They're just not doing what they used to. They're still buyers, but it's definitely shifted.
It's so weird. I'm like, how do you? I mean, you don't know that that's happening until it starts happening. Like it's so unpredictable.
It is, and then how do you figure out, who's coming back? Also, that's the other one. I believe Lynn Drexler was a printmaker, to my knowledge, but her paintings market's sure just grown rapidly. Alice Baber's another one. Ed Clark, Louise Fishman, artists that were overlooked by history at the time, and now definitely merited a resurgence of interest.
Right. Yes. Well, yeah. The canon is happily shifting a smidge.
Yes. A smidge, but yes.
A smidge, not enough. But there's like, how do you
predict it?
I mean, there's so much to keep track of, and I mean, I am fully for it, but like the widening of it, you keep all of the people that were already there, all the white boys, sorry, Adam,
that's fine.
like it's just, it's enormous.
It's
crazy.
And it is constantly shifting. And if I had a crystal ball, I would be a very rich human being, as would any of us. But it's just constantly paying attention, watching the trends. And one bad sale does not mean the market's tanked for an artist either. A lot of people get very sort of the sky is falling. You never know. Did that impression have a repaired tear? That's very difficult for people to know nowadays, since condition reports aren't posted without being able to log in or request them. It's not just put into the cataloging automatically.
Did it used to be?
Yeah, it used to be.
Oh.
Until 2010, 2012, most of that, you'd have more elaborate reports available on request, but give or take around 2010 is when most of these reports started disappearing from, or at least for prints. They never were included for paintings, though.
This is fascinating. So why the shift in 2010?
Some houses quit including it, and so some people started saying, well, wait a minute, theirs is perfect and yours isn't. And it's no, it's actually very good, just it's not listed there. And so we're all kind of ducklings. We sort of fall in line.
But if you're referring to the very brief, good lifetime impression statement at the bottom of the little tiny weeny blurb.
That's not a condition report. That's
okay.
That's a marketing tip right there.
I don't think I realized that a full-fledged condition report used to be. That's interesting.
Yeah, and if you look at a catalog from say the 2000s versus one from 2015 or so, it's a lot different what they used to include. Now, again, it's not like everything's detailed and listed out, but that's what you would mostly have, especially in the days before the internet. That used to be one of my favorite things to do, is go look at these catalogs from the 70s, 80s, early 90s, the way they would do things, where the market was then, who the people were looking at the objects at that, because that's another big factor, is who's doing the looking. So.
Oh, God, Blake, my brain is so nonprofit museum oriented. It's hilarious. When I listen to you guys, I'm like, what? I never thought of that. A little while ago, Martin Lewis was hitting the stratosphere price-wise, and Hopper has always been way the hell up. Well, not always. In the last 15, maybe 20 years.
Nice, yeah.
Who's hitting the roof these days? Surprisingly.
In regard to which category?
Oh, I don't know. American, 20th century, not contemporary, because that's so hard to predict.
Yeah, that's the thing, is when you start getting into your more traditional categories, at the moment, it's still the same names. What it is people have become much more savvy. So people have taken time to really study and learn what they're looking at when you're talking about those categories, more so than you would for, say, a contemporary work.
Well, that's heartening to hear because I feel like I'm trying to educate people constantly. And you just don't, you're just hoping that people understand enough to be curious about those issues. Sometimes they're not.
Well, if you're it always amazes me when people don't take time, but by and large, if somebody's spending $20,000, $30,000, just like when you're researching a car, you're going to research the art also. You're going to have some interest and stake in it. You want to be able to know about it. That's part of enjoying art, I think, also. Yes, there's the historical context to know about as well, but being able to talk about the object, why is this a good example of that particular work? What's the market for it? What differentiates this one from another impression? Those are things that, if you're going to do the research, it's worth knowing about, because eventually you may have to talk about it, and if you don't want to have somebody come in and lowball you in an offer for it, you might lose or something like that. So,
yeah. So for a little while, you worked for Artsy, and this is why actually I called you the first time, because I was like, Artsy is doing an auction, and I didn't even know they were doing auctions. Like in my mind, they were just an online marketplace. Mm-hmm. Was that new for them?
They started doing in-house auctions in 2019, and just like everybody, the pandemic rolled around, and that was kind of the only option is online for at least a little while. And so they did quite well. But yeah, they joined Artsy from Christie's, and they took several of us on from at least the big 3-4 houses or so, and had several very good sales, actually.
But several is not a lot.
Well, no, when 2019, if you think about a company that's less than 10 years versus a company that's 250 years old, there's a pretty big difference. So even with that time and when you don't have a multitude of departments in the way, Christie, Sotheby's, Phillips, you're doing more one sale a quarter versus a sale every other day, effectively.
Right.
And so, there's only a handful of sales to talk about.
And they're still doing it?
Yes, very much so.
It's a new business revenue stream for them, I guess.
That's exactly what it is.
Wow.
And a very focused one at that. Most houses sort of operate across a few different categories. They're laser focused on that contemporary category.
Yeah. Yes, it seems like most of the world is now focused on contemporary, which I find fascinating, because that wasn't the case when we were youngsters.
Yeah, the pendulum swings one way, that swings another.
I suppose, yeah. So do you know why auction companies are called houses?
That's a good question. I've never actually heard a good answer for that, other than maybe it was at one point held in house. I've heard, why is it called hilling? I have heard all sorts of different things like that. Do you know what hilling is?
No.
Oh, so this is one of my favorite sort of legacy old auction house type things. In fact, when I moved to Artsy and now my current post at Rago, and I finally had somebody say to me, Adam, what is this hilling thing that you keep talking about? In the old days, before electric lights, there was a time before.
And we weren't alive, people.
We were not. Yes. Nobody on this call was present then. What they would do to look at the objects is, at least at Christie's in London, there was a large hill behind the house. And to get a good look at the property, they would drag it down the hill on a nice sunny day. And they would look at it in full sunlight as opposed to over candle lights. And that's how they would do condition and inspection and all that sort of stuff.
On the rare sunny day in England?
Yeah, that's it. It's better than indoor.
Right. Come on, boys. It's sunny. We're doing it today. Wow, I did not know that.
Yeah. So that's the origin of that word.
The other one that I'm not sure I've ever explained is the idea of skying a picture. Mm-hmm. Just, hanging it really high on the wall with all of everything else on. So that's what that means, people. So in the auction house these days, how often is it that the person who's going to buy the thing is sitting in the thing flipping a paddle?
Unless you're talking about an evening sale, not particularly frequently. And really, even by 2012, 13, 14, you just start seeing the dwindling size. Now, the inverse, you start seeing more and more people on the phones. And with the advent of online bidding, even more so there. But really, somebody sitting in the room scratches their nose and all of a sudden they end up owing $1 million. No, not really happening. No, people coming in the room. Your black tie events, yes, people still like to come out for those, and that's an event and it's a fun thing to do for some. The rest of the time, though, it's a little more business as usual.
To me, technology. Hello, Ann. The difference between me saying, "Hey, Adam, I would like to go up 5,000, whatever the next increment of the bid is," versus me trying to hit. Enter on my computer, watching it. Like, I don't understand. Like, do they do them both, or is online sales something and regular sales with the phones or something else?
They do them simultaneous. Some clients love to be on the computer, have that sort of anonymity, jump in last second, which I never advise anyone to do. But they just like to be able to, or if there are multiple sales they're bidding on at once, it's much easier to have computers going back and forth as opposed to trying to juggle phones.
Sure.
But yeah, everybody's got their own preference. Some people just like to hear the voice of the person telling them what's going on in the room. If you get a really good phone bidder, they can actually give you a little bit of insight here and there. But they'll know, is the other person on another phone? Are they on with a major collector who has endless funds and so forth? Also, they can sort of say, you're bidding against an online bidder, you're bidding against another phone, you're bidding against the room, you're bidding against. So you get a little more insight there than you might necessarily get just bidding straightforward online or even being in the room in that sense. So, everybody just has their own preferences, and some people like to be seen in the sales room.
Are you on the phone?
Oftentimes, yes. I love phone bidding. Yeah? It's a lot of fun. I'm spending somebody else's money.
It's so fraught. Jesus, Lord, have mercy.
Oh, you get used to it. When you're sitting in a jewelry sale and you've got an auctioneer that's sounding everything out like it's a cattle sale, then you just sort of learn, how to roll with the punches. And there are certain tricks also, how not to bid things up too far.
Yeah. So how does that work?
Well, you can always tell somebody who hasn't bid before because they want to get in there fast and furious and as many bids as they can, and they're probably just doing it to their own detriment. So, so most phone bidders will say, look, let's hold back, let's see where things are going. The auctioneer is not going to just gavel it right away without fair warning. So, but that's if you have an experienced phone bidder in the room for you. So,
right.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh. It takes nerves of steel, sounds like.
Sometimes, especially when the auctioneer's leaning over the rostrum, staring directly at you, saying, move it along,
Sir?
Move it along. Would you like to bid that extra 100,000? So.
What?
Yeah.
You have bids that are 100,000
at
increments?
Yeah, absolutely.
In prints?
We have, yes.
Wait, on what?
Femme pleure. Picasso's
Femme pleure?
Picasso's Femme pleure.
Oh.
So when you're talking about a $5 million print, yeah.
It went for $5 million?
That's the record for it, yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah. Well, there's only 18 of them, and most of them are dedicated to somebody. And at least of the seventh state, there's 18 impressions. Most are in institutions. It's one of his largest plates. It's right at the same time as Guernica and Dora Maar, all that. So, yeah, no, it's pretty impressive work. Or even a Minotaur Mashi or something like that. So, yeah, certain hand-colored monks will get up there. Yeah,
$5 million for a piece of paper. It's amazing.
Warhol Maryland set.
Oh, well, a set. Okay. Fine. Yeah. How much?
It's in that same ballpark.
Yeah.
And that's publicly. That's not privately.
Right. I know you wrote about Warhol's early screen prints. Can you please tell us what the fascination with Warhol has not ebbed yet, where many of his compatriots are kind of not, they're not off the radar, but they're not sitting there like he is.
I don't know. I think Roy's doing okay.
Yeah, Roy's doing all right.
So now, what's the fascination? That is an excellent question. And if anyone ever tells you this is the answer right here and there, ask a lot of questions. So with that said,
Pass.
now my personal thought is everybody can recognize a Warhol. You walk into someone's house, you recognize it's a Warhol. I mean, maybe fake, or that's a different point. But these subjects are things that we can all identify, relate to. The style is something that we can understand. There's a color to go with every fabric. And then the myth. The myth is part of it also. Kind of like the myth of Picasso or Monet or any of these artists that have sort of hit that level in art history, basically. So it's buying culture. It's buying something that everyone understands and recognizes. There's so much bound up with what Warhol is. And I mean, geez, Netflix is still making movies about his diaries. As long as we still got movies coming out, just like any artist or any industry, really. I mean, people are still pushing it. So it's still very much the forefront, and people are still thinking about his work. I'm not going to weigh into the merits of his individual work. That's your job as a curator. That's yours. So.
That was my next question.
Yeah.
Do you think things would be different if he were still alive? You know, sort of the myth of early death.
I don't put a lot of thought or credit into the end of an artist's life necessarily. Certain artists were incredibly prolific at the very end. Some did great work, some did not. It doesn't necessarily advance or diminish people's interest. I think some of David Hockney's work that he's coming out with today is very interesting. Beautiful works. Does it have sort of the gravitas that maybe some of his earlier works did? No, but they're great works, and he's doing great stuff. Late Picasso is a very interesting and different area. It is, I suppose, an acquired taste. Although I say that the whole theater of the mind and all that, when he's looking at doing images of Rembrandt and all the other artists of Velázquez, and sort of I am at the stage where I'm having a conversation with my peers, essentially. It is interesting on an intellectual level. It didn't diminish from his earlier work, I don't feel like. Look at a 30s work differently because of what a 1971 etching looks like. So, yeah, I like to think Warhol really would have been able to, if he had died last year, it wouldn't have changed his market. Jasper Johns, I mean, there's a good example. He's still, I think he just stopped producing prints finally. And John Lund has been there sort of shepherding him through everything and doing wonderful work, even in the late period. And I still look at A flags or numerals with complete awe.
But how do you feel about Basquiat?
Which direction are we going with that question?
Well, I feel like people are gaga for him. He didn't produce nearly as much as other artists, and I can't quite understand I feel like people are faking. I don't know if they're faking things, but there's all those new things that came out and they're questionable, and I'm like, what is happening?
If I were a buyer today, if I did not see that it was in a Lifetime exhibition, some form of photographic evidence, I mean, that's just my opinion.
Caution.
Yeah. Was the work brilliant? Yeah, I absolutely think so. Is some of it easy to live with? Some yes, some no. There's a lot that's very challenging and really belongs in institutions because of some of the dialogues they have. Yeah. Now, the question of some of the afters that are being done now, if you love the work and you can't afford to pony up 10 million, I suppose that is the next best option. He's not the first artist to have afters.
Well, I'm just going to say, you're absolutely right. Like, what is the problem with people wanting the work and having an estate produce something to fill the need, the market?
Well, whether it's the estate or
whoever.
I mean, you can go all the way back to Monet. I mean, there were prints done after Monet's work where he signed them. Same with Picasso, you name it, an artist has done that. In fact, I would argue that is a much more bold transaction than what the estate's done with Basquiat. The artist outright was taking cash for a signature, which, fine, great. It helped disseminate their work, make people more aware of it. Anytime you can have something that has some degree of authenticity to it and have more people thinking about and looking at it, that's the point of artists, to have a dialogue and have people thinking and looking at objects, even if it's a facsimile. So.
It's such a fine line. I'm still the museum curator who wants, I don't know, it's so hard. Like, yes, it's the whole
It'd
point
make a
of
great
Prince
exhibition.
Oh, yes, you're on. Do it.
No, you do it.
I don't have a space, Adam. Yeah, there's so many, it's so fascinating. The levels of, does it matter if the facsimile isn't theoretically closer to the artist? What's the difference between I have etched this thing from my hand and, maybe my friend Adam has printed it versus, I don't know. The fancy photographs of things are just kind of irritating to me. That's the purist in me.
Think about how often artists would just do a watercolor or work on paper or even a painting and hand it over, and we don't necessarily think about. Frankenthaler did a lot like that, where she did the unique one. She stayed involved in the proofing process, but she didn't cut the blocks for quite a number of those woodcuts. She had wonderful craftsmen who would sit there and meticulously carve everything out.
That's the intention piece, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think, honestly, the question is more interesting about, and that really very few other media other than printmaking do you really get into this kind of question of where is the hand of the artist and everything. It should be part of a conversation. It is, in some circles, a conversation around painting, but it should be a much more prominent conversation. But it really is front and center for printmaking, whereas it simply isn't as much in other categories. So,
right. And our ridiculous ideas about originality and
Now I do draw.
I don't know. It's kind. It feels like the kind of commerce on one end and the kind of the artistic impulse has never felt very businesslike to me. It's such a deep-hearted, creative thing, and there's look at you. I've got some wiggling eyebrows, people. I think that's such a romantic notion on my part that is clearly false because you're raising your eyebrow at me. But I don't know. Yes, it's always been a business, and it did flip at some point to sort of art for art's sake, et cetera, whatever. But I don't know. Now I don't even know what I'm saying.
I think the question is more important than any other element of it, honestly. There's the work itself, and then there's the question of, yes, there's artist's intention, originality, those all come into factors there. But business has always been a component of it also. Whether you're talking about kings supporting artisans or the middle class, I think, it's just sort of this late 19th century idea, and even that I bet could be challenged by somebody much more knowledgeable than myself, about this sort of grand, you said it best, this romantic notion of I'm the artist and da-da-da. Those are usually the first ones to say, so when am I getting paid?
Well, exactly. Yeah, I always say to people when they complain about some actor doing some shit movie, I'm like, remember what Michael Caine said about Jaws 3? Why'd you do it, sir? I needed to pay my bills. You're right. The romantic notion is only good if you don't have to worry about everything else. Yeah,
if you're free of that. And even then, there seems to be no end to the need to get paid for one's work. Now, I will say, I think it's fascinating when you look at people like Mark Bradford and Julie Moretti, who are starting to do much more institutional work only. Their works are by commission, by and large. I think that is finally a good way for an artist to sort of circumvent things. Now it just makes the works that were already out there that much more valuable, but at least for the artist part, kind of creates
That's
some
an interesting
distance.
idea of an artist being able to not control their market, but to kind of scooch it and move it. I had never thought about that with institutional work. That's interesting.
Well, it just means your client becomes the institution. The institution is the one who's the, somebody's still always paying the bill.
Right. But those giant Gemini walls of Julie Morettu's were like, they're $250,000. And, you and I'm pretty sure can't buy them.
I've seen two come up on the secondary market, but to my knowledge, they pretty much go to institutions, and they're small editions. I mean, geez, the amount of time it would take to print those things.
Phil Sanders was telling me about the number of plates, and that it took, a team of 5 people 2.5 years to print all of that stuff. And it was, 7 tons of copper, and it's insane. And just the point that a print shop like Gemini has to front all of that money before they can see any return, answering the question, why do those things cost so much? Well, because it's a lot of work.
Yeah. So, well, and that's a place like Gemini that's very well funded. Think about some of these smaller places that don't have that kind of funding, and everything sort of hinges, can make or break a print shop pretty quickly. Or even ones
for sure.
like Dupom's. I was there last year, and I was looking at a set of Marilyn Minters they have coming up, and a giant, I forgot how large these were. They're quite intricate, and they're screen prints. I said, so how many screens do you have to use on this? And I think he said like 68 or 70. And it was not a small edition either. I mean, that is a lot of time, material, and effort. You let one dry, go through the next.
Yeah, at least with screen prints, you can pull out at least one layer of 50 and not too long. But think about re-inking all the etchings, and oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah, which is what sort of I hear a lot of people say, it's a giclée, blah, that sort of thing nowadays, and I understand that. Now, especially for emerging artists, though, that is a way for them to make a print that is going to, be somewhat intricate. It's a way to circulate their work around. If they add some hand coloring on, fantastic. Is it my favorite medium? No. Those things will never attenuate, though, I will tell you that. But it's a way to, using photographic means, have artist work circulated. Again, going back to, how original is it to the artists? Well, there's the question. But if it's somebody who's just getting out there and doesn't have a major print shop backing them or wanting to work with them, they can at least have multiples so that they're slow to produce painting. It's at least another work that somebody can acquire by them.
But you're not welcoming those into Rago, I bet.
I'd be open to it.
Yeah?
Yeah, there's some that I would. Yeah. Like Scott Kahn, he does some, was it the Ingersoll branch? It's a hand-colored piece. I'd be happy to try it.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to digital layers of things, but I definitely want there to be something more than just I've pushed the print button on the printer,
Yeah, I got into a long conversation with Craig Zamiello, who's the master printer at Two Palms a while ago, and he's very interested in technology, what it can do for printmaking and so forth, and it's a fascinating idea. What point does the digital matrix step in versus to your point, I just photographed it and pressed print, even though effectively that's what Hockney did with some of his Xeroxes. So.
Sure. Yeah, I feel like it's showing my generation, that artists will use whatever tools are the newest and will make their lives easier. Like, we can't, stop time because we don't think that that's legit somehow,
We wouldn't have Warhol screen prints if we did that.
Exactly. I actually want to circle back to Warhol for 2 seconds. What do you think he would make of what's happening to his market these days if he were or sitting on a cloud looking down and saying, Adam, can you believe this? What the hell? I
think he'd love it. As long as he could be the center of attention without being the center of attention. But the market's doing well for it. People are trying to buy them. I think he'd be on cloud 9.
Because Because I feel like that, and I'm not sure that he understood what he was doing in the end while he was alive, but this idea of celebrity and of pushing these boundaries on multiplicity, acting as painting, and like there's all of this stuff, and fame, and does anybody really know you? Like there's all these things, and I just sort of, I would love to sit down with him and have him take the mask off and actually talk to us about content and what he was trying to do. Because I do, for all of the kind of easily reproducible Marilyn Monroes that you see out there, and that it's, they're everywhere, that there's a lot more content hiding back there than pop colors.
Yeah. Do you ever see the Painters on Painting?
No.
Oh, it's fantastic. It was done early 70s, I think. It was, but it was Warhol, Johns, Rauschenberg, Newman, Lee Bontekoe, if I remember correctly.
Oh, there's one woman. Oh, that's good.
I think Frankenthaler made the list as well. Again, don't quote me on those. It's worth watching, though. Warhol's sitting there the entire time. They're trying to get exactly what you're talking about out of him. Just say one sincere, meaningful thing. Oh, no, I'm only famous because you all made me famous. I'm not here. Oh, I don't do my own art. And he had one of his wonderful studio people there. She'll be talking about everything for me. I don't need to do. And it was just pure Warhol. And it's worth watching, if nothing else, for the entertainment factor.
Yeah, right.
So, Rauschenberg did his entire interview from the top of a ladder.
He did?
Mm-hmm. With a bottle of Jack.
I was telling Craig Zamiello the other day, whose episode is dropping tomorrow as we are recording this, that Rauschenberg was just bigger than life. And I said, the only time I ever met him in person was at a opening at the National Gallery, and he was wandering around with this giant tumbler full of something brown. I don't know what it was. And he's like, oh yeah, well that was part of it.
Did Craig tell you about his story about finishing undergrad and going straight to ULE?
Yes, about Dan Weldon saying you have to go interview for this job. Yeah, it was fantastic.
Yeah. There's Bob just hanging out.
I know, right? I mean, that's a thing that I worry sometimes about the young people who are listening, that some people's stories about how they got their start are so magical and probably not really realistic to expect these days unless you're really lucky. Yeah. I do worry about that.
I think the stories that, like Craig's, I mean, those are just really lucky people. I think the rest of us have to put our time in the trenches and work our way up. And I'm finally at the point where I do start thinking about, what is somebody coming into this industry? What do they expect? What do they think? What do they have a right to say, this is how I'd like my career to progress, versus the sort of what happens kind of thing. And it just, in that magical way that things kind of work out in the art world, it just kind of works out that way. You start working, and next thing you know, you're helping an artist install their work in the gallery. And I was in Nashville for a spell and worked with like Ursula von Riddingsvard coming through and helping install those works, or working at the McNay and having all sorts of wonderful artists come through. You just, those things do happen. They're weird connections, and you get to know people, and it just goes back to the sort of art is about a dialogue, a conversation, and talking to people, and it just happens.
That's a good point, because we often talk on the pod about the collaborative nature being so communal and so not solitary, as opposed to the painters working in their, attic studios or whatever. Obviously, there's painters who are producing really good and interesting work, but I'm a people person. Like I want to know what you think about what I'm doing, and I like, if you don't have human connection, what's the point?
Yep. Don't care how great the collection is. The collection, I mean, it will have a conversation with you, but it's not going to be as rich.
Right. I agree with you. So speaking of young people trying to get into the biz, what is your best advice for them?
Oh, I have a whole series of people I talk to on a regular basis about exactly that. It's one of my favorite conversations too. Do as much as you can. Learn as much as you can. Push yourself on your comfort zone. Okay, I never thought I would leave, well, museum world. And there goes. There are certain areas, and nothing is static also. So, okay, go try this type of, if you go to grad school, doesn't mean you have to go straight into being part of academia. There's museums, nonprofits. There's a million ways to apply those skills. And as you go, just keep trying different things, different museums. Don't say, I will only work in a curatorial department or nothing else. Nothing else will do for me. There's a lot to learn being in a development department. There's a lot to learn being in a marketing department. Handling the art, learning how to properly handle an object, understanding archival materials. That's part of being those little things. Just because it seems like it's small and not a major part of what's going on in the big picture doesn't mean there aren't lessons to be learned, and take those in, try different areas out. Yeah, I spent time at the Smithsonian. I spent time at the Hyde Park Art Center, which, if anyone doesn't know what it is, it's a small little art center on the south side of Chicago. A lot of funky art, and it was a lot of fun. It's also where the Harry Who got their start.
Okay.
But yeah, just doing things like that. Go out and see art. Think about it. That doesn't mean you have to make every moment of your life that, but explore the world.
Good plan. My advice is always get over your fear of public speaking, because you'll end up talking for your.
Yeah. That's another one.
Yeah.
That's a good one. That's a really good one.
You can have it.
I probably will steal that. So,
yeah.
The other thing is keep in mind how everything intersects. I've had some people, by merit of spending time at Christie's, say, how do I get into doing XYZ from a financial perspective? Well, okay. There's not just the auction houses. There's also financial institutions that now have a big stake in art. Go learn from a private wealth perspective. It is such a broad world now that it's not just sort of one lane for everything. So
there are so many paths, which is part of the plan of this podcast, is to, within the print thing itself, like everybody does something very different from each other. Do you collect?
I do not. I don't take my work home with me.
And if you could buy 5 prints tomorrow, what from history or yesterday, what would you buy?
I'm not going to answer it on a print basis. I'm going to answer it on my current interest, which is Pennsylvania Impressionism.
What?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I bet you didn't see that one coming.
I did not.
If you look at sort of the New Hope School, it was an art colony, late 19th, early 20th century. Fantastic work. Now, I am a sucker for landscape. I will say that right up front. You give me a landscape and I am cloud nine. It's just one of those things. And so I find a lot of the figurative work a little on the saccharine side, but the landscapes I do appreciate, because it's not necessarily... it's called Pennsylvania Impressionism. It doesn't have necessarily, you can see elements of what we would think of as sort of the French avant-garde notion of Impressionism and Realism applied, but it's made into an American way, and the conversation's continued. It's not something that's sort of left as kind of entirely derivative, and I think some of the works are quite charming, actually.
Huh.
Again, I'm going to limit this to the landscape. The figurative, I get a little...
Listeners will have never heard me say that my grandmother's, on my dad's side, she had an aunt who was a painter, a Cincinnati impressionist, who studied with Frank Duveneck and the boys, whose name is Kate Reno Miller. And so my siblings and my dad, I think he still has them. Yeah, we all have a couple of really lovely impressionist paintings in our house by our great aunt. It's kind of crazy.
Well, those are things where I love hearing, because there are people who still have those connections to when it was first either brought into their family, and being in the New Hope area for work. I hear those stories all the time, and it's sort of old families that so-and-so's grandmother or whoever happened to acquire it back in da-da-da-da. And yeah, that's really quite interesting.
Yeah, she taught at the Cincinnati Art Museum School or in the education department or however they structured it for years and years and years and years, and never married. So they kind of spread out to the nieces and nephews, and a couple of them have, my grandmother in it as a child, kind of a thing, and they're beautiful seaside, beautiful, they're just lovely. So yeah. It's easy to love Impressionism.
It is easy to love Impressionism, especially if you know some of the sites that I'm rendering. It really takes on a new level of interest. You can always go to the James Michener Museum and see a few of them also.
Oh, all right. I haven't been there.
Yeah, it's Doylestown, if I remember right. So,
Doylestown?
Yeah.
Wait, do you live in New Hope?
I don't. I live a little further north in Montclair.
Oh, you're up near the city?
Yeah.
Okay. My dad grew up in Montclair.
Oh.
It's Old Home Week here with Adam. Sometimes I head up to the Brandywine and just sort of, it's just such a beautiful setting, and the countryside's so gorgeous. And then the other place that's near there is the Wharton Escherich House Museum. Have you been there?
I have not. It is on my list.
So good. It is the craziest place. Like, I knew him as a printmaker because the BMA had some prints of his in the collection, and the Print Drawing and Photograph Society, which was the support group for the print department, we scheduled a trip it was a Saturday field trip or something, and we went to the Escherich Museum in shifts because it's tiny, and it's like a Hobbit hut house, and he had started making furniture, and so basically he built the house, and it's like a shipwright. Like, everything, they're not trap doors, but it's like everything fits. It's like an organic Frank Lloyd Wright kind of house, like more organic than Frank Lloyd Wright. There's not a square corner in the place, and it's fantastic. It's fantastic.
I grew up one block away from the only Frank Lloyd Wright house in Tulsa, Oklahoma, or in Oklahoma for that matter. So
yeah, right.
And it was very square and boxy. So.
Was it open or privately owned?
Privately owned.
Yeah. And there's one actually near us in Baltimore that is also privately owned. And I saw a dumpster outside it the other day, and I was like, oh no.
They aren't ripping everything out, I hope.
I don't know. I haven't knocked on the door yet. Yeah. It's bizarre. Anyway.
Yeah.
All right. When's your next sale?
2 days from now.
Oh my gosh.
We have a
post-war.
Yeah. We have a post-war sale in 2 days. Then we have our American and European sale on Friday. And then we have the Corman collection coming up on Thursday, which is a wonderful Pennsylvania family who mostly collected design. It's a whole new world for me as well. Never heard the name Sam Maloof until the other day, and then I had one of my colleagues walk me through the fine points of his work and art, and I sat down that night and flipped on PBS, and who should be interviewed but Sam Maloof. So,
wow.
Yeah, that is one good thing about auctions, is there is never a dull moment. If you find yourself with a dull moment, you're probably not doing something right.
I was going to say, something's wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, the pace always scared me, I have to confess.
You get used to it. Now, I also don't have to worry about the exact placement in quite the same way in an exhibition, because it'll all be down in a week.
That actually brings me to a couple questions. One, not every auction has a preview where you're hanging things, right?
Not every, but at least at Rago, we try to do an exhibition for everything. Most auction houses, unless it's an online sale, and even a lot of online sales, it's at least available. But most of your sort of more marquee sales will have the proper view. You can walk in, tour the collection, sale, see what's coming up.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. You want to see the thing in person, right?
Historically, yes. Today, nowadays, I mean, views are rather more akin to a ghost town, which I personally love. I get too many people in the gallery and can't see the work because somebody's standing in front of it. So,
so I feel like I didn't ask you earlier, and I should have. What does your job entail? You are actively working to get people to come to Rago to use their services for auction. And then what happens? You're not cataloging everything. You have people to do that.
We do have catalogers, but time allowing, we do still like to review. My Friday night was exciting. I was reading through a catalog text. So, but no, we still try to review, make sure at least the literature references are included. If we can identify the state, make sure the state is included. Go through, make sure, is that a actual signature in graphite? We say pencil, a little easier. Graphite should be, but I know. Or is it a stamp signature?
Right.
And just because it says graphite doesn't mean it's actually in graphite, I might say.
Sure, of course, of course.
So, but
do you write the text that goes into the catalog?
At Christie's, I wrote quite a lot of text, sort of catalog notes. The why is this special? The cocktail party piece. When you're giving the tour and saying, that sort of thing. Yeah. We have a whole content team that does that for us at Rago. Part of their job is basically going to the library and researching certain works and doing write-ups. And it's wonderful because I learned all sorts of things from them.
So the specialist is, obviously you're a subject matter expert. You have to know what you're talking about, but you're really kind of the sales end.
Yeah, it's always
not
kind
supposed
of
to
a
sound
tricky
tawdry.
thing. Yeah, it's all well. No, it's very much part of it, and it is part of the sales component of it. Well, also, I hate the term expert. I think experts, nobody's truly ever an expert. But for better or worse, specialists are treated like that, which many should not be. Many should be also. You have to know your subject. You have to be able to know your market. You generally expected to be able to see something and say, hey, XYZ about it, and then be able to communicate that to your clients. Buy this one because of this reason. Don't buy that one. I don't like this. I've seen better ones here, there. It's all kind of weaves itself together. And then I touched on it earlier with the estates component. That's another thing you have to be able to talk about is how, you don't give tax advice, but you still need to be able to talk about some of that stuff because it's a real factor. These are objects in our world that we have to think about the same way we do a car, house, you name it. So.
Right. So, yeah, actually, now you've brought something else up that I'm like, wait, hold on. I didn't think of it that way. So when I said sales, I was thinking about you finding people who wanted to sell. But you're talking about having relationships with people who want to buy. So do I call you and say, I'm interested in a Nordfeld skyrockets, and you have me in the back of your mind as you go along, and then suddenly you call me and say, hey, Ann, I've got one?
When you least expect it.
Oh, wow. Jesus, how do you keep all that in your mind?
Yeah, that's the trick. At the end of the day, we're very good with databases. It's more making sure that the right people who are, thinking about objects are aware that the sale's coming up, if you know what they're interested in. I have clients who, love going back to Jasper targets. They want to have every target that he made. And so, reach out to them. Or they love Martin Lewis, Scenes of Danbury, things like that. And so, you kind of keep your usual suspects list in mind. Oftentimes people are looking for things right then and there, and it doesn't usually work that way. It takes time. Some dealers may have things in stock. That's not necessarily how auction houses work. Right. If it's worth enough value, people will go out and do the looking. You're getting pretty high in value at that point.
Right. But you have people who are looking for multiple things that you have a relationship with now that you, that's insane. Yeah.
It goes back to the people thing.
I know, but I never thought about being a client of an auction house in that manner.
A large number of private clients realize that, that dealers are great. Dealers, they do a wonderful job vetting material, and they keep their list of, what people are looking for. A lot of times they're buying it from auction, whether it's publicly or privately. Private sales are done quite often. And so a lot of buyers over time just realize, just because these records are public, hey, wait a minute, this person bought for 30% less 2 weeks ago. And so they start buying at auction, and they keep those relationships, as well as the dealers who do keep them from making a lot of mistakes.
Right.
So,
sure.
Yeah.
Huh. The other thing that has always, it's not bugged me about auction houses, but when you're doing research and the last known, moment you saw that painting or sculpture or even a special impression of a print was on the pages of an auction catalog, and you can't find out where it went after the sale, which I understand the privacy bit and all that stuff. But like, sometimes you're just like, oh my God, you want to be able to find something, to borrow it or whatever.
Think about it this way. If it had gone through a gallery, you may never have even known it existed or was out there as something. The fact that it's on auction house's catalog cover means that somebody somewhere at least has some piece of the crumb that is public and recognizable. I would get those requests all the time. Can you call XYZ client and see if they would be open to lending this work to an exhibition? At that point, it's just like any private request. They're going to say yes, or they're going to say no, or they're going to say, give me more information.
So for us who are looking for things, we just ask you to forward our request along and hope for the best.
That's it.
Yeah. Okay. So. It's fascinating. You're absolutely right about the sort of record part of it, and having all those auction catalogs on the shelves is super wonderful.
Yeah,
I miss pull one down and say, oh, look, there it is. Yeah.
I miss the days of catalogs, because that's the thing. It was a real pain in the butt to have to produce those things. But flip side, though, you get a hefty catalog, it drops on your desk. It's a door stopper, but boy, do you feel proud of it for about 5 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, who's proofreading those things? The speed, I keep coming back to the speed, but like the production speed is insane.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a well-oiled machine.
Yes, I suppose. How many people do you have in your department that support the auctions for you?
For Rago, on the fine art side, there's probably about 20, 25 people who are on the backside supporting everything, making sure the wheels stay on the bus.
Okay. For all of
the fine art. For all fine art. Okay. Yeah, and that's just Rago. And then there's also, the other branches as well, and we sort of share information and technology and art handling and photography and all that stuff as well. Expertise.
Right. So if I called you tomorrow and I said I have 5 works, do I have to drive them to Montclair? If they're not framed, do you frame them like? Yeah. I mean, how does the nitty-gritty? I don't even know how to begin. I know it's a conversation, but what happens?
Yeah, everybody agrees on the numbers, contracts get signed. If it's lower value, then a lot of times people will just bring the works over to our warehouse themselves and drop it off. If it's, not nearby, then, there's a whole range of shippers. Not everything necessarily needs a crate. Sometimes you can do, I see the curator in you saying, oh dear God, what is this?
No.
What is he talking about? No, perish the thought.
I'm pretty cavalier. I have some packing blankets in my car.
Yeah.
I'm fine.
Yep, that's it. Sometimes man with a van does the job. Other times, you want a little more white glove service. And as with everything, the more money behind it, if you're talking Botero sculptures, yes, there is going to be a small army of people that descend upon your residence, pack it up very well for delivery, and you may or may not get the auction house to absorb that cost of a small army to do that. If you're talking small painting, you probably have 2 guys, $20,000, the auction house is probably going to ask you to absorb some of the shipping costs, but it's going to be a couple $100s, unless it's like some sort of rush shipment or something like that.
Right.
And the thing I always tell people is, it's a dirty little secret. There's always another sale. You don't have to make the next one immediately available. If it's cheaper to wait and saves you a few $100s, wait.
If I came to you and you thought the work was better suited to Phillips or something else, do you pass on things and then suggest that if this is more suited to a local auction house or a higher end auction house?
Yes, absolutely. Generally speaking, don't give me the Rothko. Not gonna do right for you. That needs to go to an international house, and if it is something that merits an evening sale, then it probably should go to Christie's, Sotheby's, maybe Phillips. At that point, you're talking 7 figures, and so they'll do a better job. But anything shy of that, if we're talking colonial, Latin American, old masters, or something that I tend to refer out a lot. There are places that will do much better with those. Now, on the flip side, that's looking at the high end of the spectrum. Lower end of the spectrum, there's also a value level where it's not necessarily good to send it to us either, just because we'll either charge far more, or because it's not as likely to sell, or we won't take it at all. And there are a whole slew of regional places that do excellent job with that.
What happens if I give you my, favorite print by Warhol and it doesn't, for whatever reason, doesn't sell? Then what happens?
Well, we either have a conversation about reoffering it at a lower estimate later, or we arrange for return shipping.
Okay. That happens, though. It happens frequently, doesn't it?
Try not. Not bad at my job. I'm pretty good at it, in fact, I might say so.
Okay, but so when it says bought in, what does that mean?
It means it didn't sell.
Okay, that's passed. The same thing.
Yeah, it's the same thing. Legally, any brick and mortar auction has to show the records for whether a work was bought or sold. If it's sold, you have to show the price, including the premium, because that goes into appraisal values and has public usage. And so that goes out there. So if a work doesn't sell, yes, there is a record there. The good part about prints is it's not as damning as it can be in certain other areas. If you're talking a wet paint situation, artist has been out of school for 2 years, and that work passes, you're going to have to hold on to it for a while. You don't want to just put it the next sale and reoffer it. And most ethical specialists and houses will also say, don't do it. Now, you're talking multiples. Who cares? Just revise the estimate. Put it back out there. Pretty much all my finance clients joke that I'm a bond trader. So,
but if I am watching an auction and I see that something has been bought in, if I contact you to make a deal, then what happens?
I love making a deal.
I mean, it's still under contract to you, so even if it's a private sale, I see that's written into it.
It's written. Most contracts have it written in that the house can at least bring an offer, hold on to it, negotiate an after-sale deal. There's nothing that drives a specialist battier than doing those, but they are a thing. And it's we'll take offers. At that point, it is the vendor's discretion whether to sell it or not. Now, each contract, depending on the house, is a little bit different. Some places, if you make an offer above the reserve, they'll sell it, and vendor doesn't have much recourse. Every place is a little bit different in how they structure that. Most places, what they'll do is they'll take all the offers, take them either as they come in or the highest offer to the vendor of a property, say, would you like to take it? This is what you'll make, yes or no. So
the price in general that I would have to come to is the reserve if I came after the sale?
Not necessarily. You can offer below the reserve. Now the vendor may say, no, thank you.
Right.
No harm, no foul. Huh. Now, what I've always said no to is, some vendor says no, somebody comes back, okay, well, let's go 100 less, 1,000 less, 10,000 less. We're not running an auction after an auction.
Right. Okay. Yeah. You've heard it here first, people. All right. I think I've asked all my questions. I'm sure I'll come up with more as soon as I stop the call. But anything else you want to tell the fine people of Platemark about what you do and who you are?
Anyone who wants to talk about prints, love to do it, whether market or otherwise. Big fan of museums. If any curators are out there and have fun exhibitions coming up, I'd love to hear about them. That is absolutely true. I do. I have a whole collection of catalogs, some read, some not. But it's always interesting to see what research is being done. Much of the trade is we still harbor some fantasy of being scholars, also. So.
I think you are. I mean, you're deep in it, and I mean, what you do with prints is not a lot different from what other people do with prints.
Yeah, no. Please come see us at Rago. If no one's been to Lambertville, it's a very cute town. Our sales room's an old textile mill, and it's sort of right on the water, and beautiful restaurants and that sort of stuff. So, not every auction house is in New York. So, yeah, prints, paintings, works on paper. Love everything and happy to discuss.
Okay, good to know. Yeah, your contact info. Well, I don't know how much. Well, You're findable. People can find you. But I'll stick stuff in the show notes too.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for coming on Platemark. I had so many questions in the back of my mind. I knew it would be just like fire. I'm sorry about that, but
oh no,
it's like a fascinating other side of the whole thing.
Well, like so many things, it's not like there is no one source for how everything's done. And so everybody has to learn this conversation. So much of it's not taught in school. I mean, I never learned really how to look at a print or how the market works for these things. I've certainly had plenty of people in academia look at me like I have cloven hooves, but everybody's got to learn somehow, some way. And yeah, listening to podcasts, reading books, talking to people, that's the only way it's done. So.
Yeah, I'm sure we're not the only subject in the world that has little academic sort of early learning about it. It's weird. I don't know why it is. I mean, I feel like prints get the shit all the time, but we're all here to help everybody understand. We're happy to do it.
And print people are nice people.
Yeah. Print people are the nicest people.
That they are.
That's right. All right, Adam, thank you. Thank you again. Thank you for listening to this episode of Platemark with Adam McCoy. I hope you enjoyed hearing his perspective from the auction side of things. I find it fascinating, and I still have questions. If you value the content that I'm producing at Platemark, please support us, me. It's just me. Go over to platemarkpodcast.com and hit the support and donate button. All right, let's see. Oh, thank you. Thank you to Michael Diamond for the use of his original music. Also to Dan Fury for his help with sound and a first pass at editing. Super essential. And a thank you also to Lee Turner and Skip Barnhart for letting me use sound clips from their studios for the soundscape at the beginning of the pod. And of course, thank you to Adam for being a great guest. All right, we'll see you next time.